Alright, so today we got a set of 95 Honda VT 1100 C carburetors. So these are basically in need of probably most likely just a pilot jet clean. So I've gone ahead and broken all the standard JIS screws loose, and that way I can just grab my screwdriver on the drill and just pop them all loose that way. Grab that now. So on the 4-cylinder, they're using Markham cylinder 1, 2, 3, etc. But for this one, I know the sides just based on the linkage around it. So we'll pop this off nice and slow. Now that doesn't want to come off, if you see, it just sort of hangs there. But I can tell the rubber is actually, mated to the steel, which means this plastic, there we go, will come up with it. And the last thing you want to do is tear the diaphragm. I'm always inspecting for cracks or leaks because we can replace that pretty easy on some and a little bit more difficult on others because they were meant to be replaced as a unit. That's why there's no easy way to just take a circlip and undo the rubber diaphragm. You got to kind of cut the retainer ring. But with this one, what is it, a 95, they do make the needle quite easy to get out. You take a Phillips, turn it maybe, 45 degrees one way, and you can see here the needle retainer comes out. And there's a washer in there. So there's your needle. I still got a washer stuck down in there. There we go. It's just important that when you put the assembly back together, you understand that the washer goes on the bottom, because these are what you call shimless needles. They don't actually have shims, but they do have profiles which are stamped there. This looks like a 6EE, so it's fine with me. Anyways, I'll place that back in the retainer where the spring is. So that's gonna go there. But at least we got it out, and I can tell there's no cracks. I hold that up to a light and don't see anything. And I'll just do the bottom on the same side so we can get through. One body, and one body will tell you the story of the second body. Sometimes you always got to give it a knock and then it comes out. And that actually doesn't look too dirty. I believe that is your supply for choke, or what they call the emulsion tube. That's your pilot and that's your main. So we'll be pulling those out, holding them under light, cleaning them with most likely a 10,000s or 12,000s guitar string. But you can see all this dried fuel. A lot of times that happens from people buying like 98 ethanol or 98 octane fuel, and the ethanol in it just gums up because there's no benefit to riding something with that much octane unless you have something with high compression that demands it. Now, there was no issues with leaking, so I assume the float and the float needle will be in okay condition, which they are. I don't see any big dents or grooves, so I'm happy with that. And now we'll just pop these jets loose. I did a travel job, so a lot of my tools are a bit spread out, but I've custom made a screwdriver that fits the profile. So what I look for is that it goes all the way to the bottom and that there's no slot. And you can see there's a lot of resistance, which there always are on pilot jets, but it's come loose because I've used the correct screwdriver. With the Phillips head ones, you need to use GIS screwdrivers. I use Vessel brand. If you can see that there, they're from Japan. Japanese Imperial Standard is what that, or industry standard, I can't remember what that calls for. So we've got 42s on this. Sometimes the rear, because it runs hotter, because there's no air around it, will have slightly smaller mains. Usually I see the pilot jet is the same in both, but we're going to find out. So there you go, guitar string, because I don't see daylight through that. So I've got a set of carb files, but they only get so fine that most pilot jets, I end up using a guitar string. It works a lot better. But yeah, these pilots are definitely blocked, which is what the customer had suspected. And when these are blocked, you're going to get really bad idle, or only idle with the choke on. And when you go to take off, it'll probably stutter a bit or just completely die. And these are going to go through the ultrasonic cleaner, but a lot of times just getting this guitar string in there and poking around will get the dirt out first. There we go. So that's come through. And I don't see a heap of dirt, but it doesn't take much when it's only 0.48 of a mil. So I usually put a little bend in the screwdriver, and that acts as like a extra way to clean the walls. So I'm just running that up and down, running that up and down. And you'd be surprised, even though I did that, you still can't see daylight, but bit of compressed air, and there you go. It's nice and round. Now that's going to go in the ultrasonic, and I'll show you. Some of the, always buy the 30-liter ultrasonic. Don't mess around with the smaller ones. They don't have the same power, and I won't get into it, but sometimes they come with these jewelry holders, and that's what I tend to put the smaller jets in, and bolts. I'm fortunate enough, I got a big stock of original GIS screws that are all brand new plated. So often I will just install all new screws for the customer because they're usually stripped. If they're in good shape, I'll just hit them with the brass wheel and clean them up, but if not, I like to replace them. So this main jet, it's usually a 7 mil that will take the hex head part. You could try and use a flathead to just remove the main jet from the larger body. I'm not sure if this is called an emulsion tube. I think the emulsion tube is what's underneath, but perhaps not. Let's see what size mains we got. Yep, 132, 132. Ooh, I can barely see anything through that. So let's take our carb files. You can see here, just a set of small piano wires with little grooved files on the end. These work good for main jets. I mean, right away on my finger you can see what's coming out of that. So this bike's just set a while, probably either a few months or a year, I can't quite remember. And you can even hear those little files going into action. Oh yeah, there we go. Now, and what says 132, that means 1.32 mil. Now I can see 1.32 mil through there. This one may not fit. No. So for these carbs, obviously I'll soak the whole body in the ultrasonic, and you'll see a lot of this dirt and everything go away. I'll replicate exactly what I just did on the other side. And while I'm here, might as well pop off I believe this is an air cutoff valve. When they're on the bottom of the float bowl. It looks very similar, but it's actually an accelerator pump, meaning it shoots a stream of fuel down into the valve area when you pull the... All right, might as well just film the second half of this. Same process, just on the idle adjuster side. Remember, I already loosened those with my screwdriver by hand. I'd never just tackle it straight ahead with a screw gun. That's a drill with it set to screw setting with a torque all the way down to 1. So if I ever go to tighten anything, it doesn't strip the head. So it's coming out. There's a bit of gunk around the gasket. See if they got any gasket laying around. But again, that yellow stuff, that's all inside the pilot jets and everything. A lot of times you'll find too is if it has a kickstand, this bike not so much because the carb sort of sits in the middle and it's a V-twin, but if it's a 4-cylinder and it has a kickstand and the bike kicks to the left and leans to the left, it's usually that far left carb that, you know, gravity is leading all of the fuel and everything. It just sits in there over time. That's usually the worst of the 4 carbs. So let's just check our jet size, 42 here. This one, actually, I do see a tiny bit of daylight through, but that's not enough. We want all daylight, so there we go. First try, the cleaner needle went through. Much better. I will chuck this actually in a separate looking one. Yep. Now, this isn't by design. I've only got 2 of these little jewelry holders, but it's nice when you have one that looks so different from the other carburetor part that you don't mix the 2 jets. Just anything to help yourself make sure you get them back in the right cylinder. Ooh, look at that. That's dirty and black. You always want to check you can see through the side holes in the emulsion tube, because that is what helps generate that Venturi effect, sucking the air through to get the fuel to come with it, you know. So if you don't know about the Venturi effect, you're going to want to know that one. It's actually not too dirty inside, but outside is pretty bad. Anytime you use the Scotch-Brite, which I love it, it's just anytime you use it, you're gonna have to run the part through a bath to get any fibers off. You can see that brass is just corroded and darkened to the Statue of Liberty. I mean, goodness. So that'll go in there. The Evapor rust I use, the chemical I use in my bath, I can't speak highly enough about it, but it will take care of all that and not darken or corrode any rubber parts or metal parts for that matter. Okay, I'm just looking at the needle. That's perfect. No issue there. So that is the bottom. You can see in the bottom you don't see a bunch of dried up fuel because that's up top. It's all in the base of the float bowl where your problems sit. And I will ultrasonic all these smaller parts individually. I just like to let the body get the first clean part of the bath. See, same thing here. Rubber likes to stay with the cap. It's no issue. If it was really stuck on, I'd probably let it heat up in the ultrasonic and then take it off. There you go. That's it. Now I'll chuck these in the ultrasonic, get that pump off, and we're good to go. Alright, so I've just pulled these out of the ultrasonic. It's still running with some other things, but it's pretty warm to the touch. It's a great time to try and loosen any bolts that you weren't able to get or comfortable aiming at, but I'm just putting the back sides of the butterfly here while it's still hot, as well as down in the tube where the main needle slides in. And that carb cleaner is going to get rid of some gunk, but really what you want is to use your compressed air while it's hot. Such as like on this one, I can see a huge improvement in cleanliness. But if you recall, there was a choke, this choke here, it's stuck in, it wouldn't come out with the plunger. So while it's warm, I can try two things. I can try compressed air. That probably won't work. Yeah, it does seem to work a little bit here. It works to the point I can see the end of the plunger. Meaning if I use my pick, that's the choke circuit there. The end of the plunger's just come out, so if I use my pick to try and slide it out, oh, that slides out actually beautiful. So the heat really did a trick there. All right, I think compressed air will shoot this out now. Yep. There it is. There's the plunger. No harm, no foul, that's all good. So we'll include that back with the customer job. And now we'll take our compressed air, that was a bit loud, but essentially what I've got now is a nice dry set of carbs. I've blown off all the vapor rust chemical, so no water sits and starts to corrode it. Still gotta pop that air cutoff pump, but you get the idea I'm going for here. And it's basically ready to get those jets that are nice and clean. We'll get them reinstalled and sink the butterflies. All right, hopefully you can still hear me, but let's go through the process of putting these air cutoff diaphragms back in. Just to make sure they're clean and that the plunger's clean. That's often what dirties up the most, is the plunger itself right there. So, diaphragm goes in, the D-ring goes in with the flat side on the bottom, round side pointed up. How well you can see that, probably could do better at backlighting, but it's what it is. And I've already taken compressed air and carb cleaner and blown through that jet, the orifice there, to make sure it's clear. So the only tricky part is getting the correct bolts. Okay, so while I've still got parts in the cleaner, I've just noticed a bit of grime around the diaphragm slide area. So what I typically do, I try to avoid full heat in the ultrasonic bath on the rubber diaphragm itself, because it can expand and make it a real pain to get back in. So carb cleaner, what it does, it has a very good ethanol. It breaks down ethanol. It breaks down old fuel that's crusty. So you'll see me rubbing it with just a somewhat clean cloth, but nothing rough, no sandpaper or anything like that. Just trying to get rid of residue. And I'm still working on a new lubricant that will not get tacky. What I've found that works pretty good, I like CRC products. They're nice to me, but some of this goes a long way, even just to impregnate the diaphragm itself with a bit of not oil, but some type of lubrication. It definitely rejuvenates it, and you can see sort of old versus new, so we'll do the same here. Clean. I'm just making sure I've got no gunk whatsoever, so that these can slide up and down really well. And then just a thin film of that. Trying to let it soak into the diaphragm, but I don't leave it coated in it because I don't want it to be sticky. I just want that plastic, if it does have any micro voids, and it can absorb anything, I want it to absorb something that has lubrication. So it can be impregnated with a lubrication, not something like a carb cleaner that is very dry. Alright, so we'll just reinstall this air cutoff pump. I've cleaned the plunger. There's no tears in the diaphragm. It fits in there perfect, goes up and down. We got the D-ring seal in there with the flat side down, round side up. I've blown compressed air through this, so I know the airways have contact with each other. So some of the springs are tapered, this one's not, so it's fairly easy just to get on there. You just want to make sure the seal doesn't pop out of place, which is easy to tell because you see a big gap. I don't see one. And the bolts for these, they are the short ones with the lock washers. If you got them all thrown in a pile and you're trying to figure out which ones are the tops and bottoms and which ones are the air cutoff valves. Now, I do have new screws and bolts in stock, but if they're not stripped or worn, I usually take the heads, clean them up, hit them with a brass wheel, and they look brand new. Not so much in the interest of not using stock I have, because I've got plenty, but there will come a time where I actually need to use it. And I think that looks pretty cool. That's the effect the ultrasonic has on an alloy. I guarantee that's a different alloy than the rest of the body, which you wouldn't think, but there's a reason it has that color difference, especially on both sides there, you can see. So now we're ready to do the jetting down below. So our first side was this side that we took apart, so we'll put that back in. You can see how much cleaner our jets look. You double check, we can see perfectly round through both. Might as well just give it one last needle clean, just to be sure. So that's good. And I've already blown compressed air, but why not? We'll do it again. Pilot jet goes in there. I don't use any assembly lube. I leave it as is because that assembly lube eventually turns into gum after being in contact with fuel. And that gum I've seen block up a main jet, so I stopped doing that a couple years ago. I'm not going anything for crazy tight there. And because I didn't need to replace the main jet, I'm literally just going to tighten this up using the 7mm hex that's on the emulsion tube itself. Nothing crazy, you just don't want it vibrating loose. For the float bowls themselves, you really want to keep this needle seat clean, so carb cleaner is good for that. And sometimes I'll take a Q-tip and hit it in there, but leaking fuel was not an issue, so obviously I'll leak test it before the customer gets it back, but I don't think I need to spend too much time worrying about this function of the carburetor so much. It was definitely the pilot jets. So we do that, and then we play a game called Where the Hell Did I Stick the Pin? Which always makes sense when I find it. And some of these, 90s ones, there's only one way to put the needle in and out, and they're not press fit, which is awesome. Press fit sucks because you got to hammer it out, and often you'll break a leg. We don't want to do that. And you can see the type of bounce we got there. I'll find the spec and just measure the float height. If that spring inside the float needle is worn out and you have too much bounce, you can get too much fuel level, and then the bike will just run a ridge naturally because of that. Switching over sides now to the idle adjustment side. Well, when the pin's in your mouth, it's kind of hard to find it on the table, isn't it? Same thing, just from the opposite side, no push fit, just slides right in. And the bowl itself, the shape of it, means that this pin could not really go left or right more than a 1/2 mil, so it holds it, retains it in place. In the past, they used to use, sort of tapered pins that tap in and tap out, and then we had broken arms on the body, which basically meant you had to either get a new body or get real creative. So we will find a way. I'll get the, when I run my leak test, I hook fuel up to it just as if it was the fuel tank, and I let it run, fill up the carbs, check for leaks, and then I will also check for float height as well. You can see I've removed the drain bleed screw to clean all that out, so I am guaranteed access to check float levels via like a clear tube hooked up, and I want it to end right at the 1/8 inch mark below the bowl. Because these are at an angle, it's a bit tricky to picture them, how they look. I'm just checking to make sure I can see down all the holes, which I can. I've got another set of carbs that are McCuney, and the pilot jets on those are recessed into the alloy. And they tend to be the ones that get stripped out by somebody I don't know, because previous owners. And there is a method to getting those out. That's not an easy out, or anything crazy. You just can actually punch a squared bit driver in there, and it because it's brass and soft, it forms its own grip. So we've rebuilt the bottom ends. For the top ends, we're going to slide the diaphragms in and screw them in tight. And then for these bottom ends, basically what you're going to see is me put those on, and then put the 4 bowl screws together. Again, I've hit these with the brass wheel because none of them are stripped. And I'll show you the magic of having a drill that's set at a really low clutch. So set that to 1. The speed doesn't need to be 3. I'll go for 2 and just go slow. That clicking noise, that's not it stripping out, that's the clutch in the drill. And the velocity it tightens at means it's tight. So when I go to check it by hand, which I always do, it rarely goes any more than it needs to. So I'll do that for this one, and then we'll come back and do the tops. While I'm in here, I'm just going to go ahead and replace these bowl gaskets, because somebody before has come in with silicone and all kinds of stuff. So we'll pop this back off actually. You can see what I do is I just take a pick. I started cleaning up all the silicone that they had put on there, but I've got hundreds of thousands of gaskets in stock for all kinds of carbs, and this happened to be one of them, so why not just put new gaskets in? Probably could have gotten away with keeping the old ones in, so I'll hit these with the brass wheel and watch what happens. Okay, so now I've got 2 clean bowls and 2 new gaskets. Now a lot of times these won't go on perfect right away, even when they're OEM. I had mine made based off of OEM, but that doesn't guarantee perfect fitment. So I'm just cleaning everything out. And I will actually sometimes use like a Loctite super glue just to hold it in the corners so I don't have to deal with that. I'm sure some of you in the comments will have an issue with it, but it doesn't really affect the next guy because that just means the gasket's going to stick to the bowl, not the carb body. And if he has to replace it, well, he's going to tear the gasket up anyway, so couple dabs of super glue doesn't hurt anybody, I don't think. Could be wrong, let me know. Just coming in here with a pick, trying to get all the old stuff. Alright, so here's the new gasket. Let's see how it sits in naturally. Not too bad actually. Just goes right in. So yeah, when you give a supplier a part and they do their end of the deal right, it makes your end of the deal a lot easier. Basically, I'm just looking around to make sure it hasn't come out of place. I'll even drop it. Look at that, it stayed in place first try, no glue needed. I don't use glue or adhesive if I don't have to. So that's one more thing we do, is we put new gaskets on when we can. There's no shame in that. All right, good day for technical difficulties. Basically, I recorded the ending of that session and it didn't record, but I wanted to show you how I wait till the end of the carb rebuild to do the fuel mixture screw, which affects how much fuel is introduced at idle. So I found these almost 4 turns out. The book calls for 2 3/4, which I find is even high. That may be related to the fact the main jets are 132 and the book calls for 150s, 160s, depending on the country of origin. But I pull these out, if you notice vertical. I'll leave the spring, the washer, and the O-ring in there if I can, because if I take all this out and throw it in the ultrasonic, all that shit falls out, and it's really a very short passage. So I'm able to use compressed air and clean it manually, but I take these, hit them with the brass wheel, it gives them a nice shine, and then I set them back to, if the book's calling for 2 3/4 and they were at 4, I'll probably go like just past 2 3/4, and if they've got issues, they can easily access these screws on this model if they're not like a Japanese 4-cylinder where they're buried in there. You need a special screwdriver, so I'm pretty confident they'll dial this in. And maybe they'll want me to increase the main jets. We'll talk about that with the customer. I'm always a big fan of increasing the main jets. A lot of times the smaller jet is just purely an emissions thing. You put in a larger jet and the bike just comes to life. So hopefully that's what happens, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks.